The low, soft, gray light begins to seep through the gaps in your woven curtain. It is not quite day yet, but it has shed the absolute darkness of sleep, replacing it with a muted wash that feels cool against the window glass. You do not feel the need to rush. The village seems steeped in this pre-dawn quietude, a time when sound itself travels differently, more resonant, more contained. You feel the slight stiffness in your limbs as you shift on the straw pallet. The earth chill, trapped beneath the floorboards, rises up and meets your bare feet. You become mindful of that coolness, noting how quickly it works its way into the soles of your feet, a gentle reminder that your body is simply material within this cold, solid world. Slowly, deliberately, you begin to draw yourself upright. This movement requires effort, not because you are weak, but because every joint and tendon has settled deep into the comfort of rest. You raise your arms slowly over your head, stretching just enough to coax a soft ache from your back. You pay attention to the subtle pop in your shoulder joints, sounds that speak only to your own body and nothing else. The wood frame of the house creaks faintly beneath your weight as you unfold yourself completely. It is an old sound, a deep sigh from aged timber, when you have heard countless times before. From this elevated position, you simply observe the room. The shadows are long and indistinct, pulling the corners into soft pools of gray. A small dust motes dance in the meager shafts of weak light that manage to pierce the smoke-stained window panes. You notice the pattern of faint smudges on the woven wall hanging, the little history of hands reaching out over years. The air itself has a distinct smell, a mingling of banked wood smoke, stale sweat from last night's evening routines, and the underlying scent of damp earth that always permeates life in close quarters. You slide your feet carefully onto the dirt floor near the hearth. There is a gritty texture under your soles, different from the smoother path you will walk later. You stand still for a moment, letting the stillness become almost physical, filling your lungs with this cool, layered air. This quiet beginning feels like a profound sort of pause before the day's slow turning truly begins. The first small action is usually washing your hands and face. The water must be retrieved, and though you have not left the dwelling yet, the thought of its clean temperature guides your movements toward the wash basin. You reach for the ceramic pitcher, finding it cool and surprisingly heavy in your hands. When you splash your wrists and palms with whatever residual water is available, you are acutely aware of the shocking coolness against your skin, a momentary jolt that seems to wake up not just your senses, but a deeper part of your awareness. You wipe your face slowly with a piece of linen, a cloth whose threads have been softened by countless washes. The fabric holds the faint scent of soap and simple fibers. As you cup your hands under the imagined flow of water, you consider how much time passes in these small, deliberate morning rituals. It is not about cleaning away grime. It is about setting a steady rhythm for the hours that await you. The need to leave the house grows subtly within you. The gray light seems too constrained, and the smells of the dwelling, the rich blend of human life and settled wood smoke, demand exposure to something wider, cooler, and more open. You move toward the doorway, brushing past a hanging basket whose dried herbs nod slightly in an imperceptible draft. You step out into the yard, pausing at the threshold. The shift in light is subtle but definite. The gray outside feels thinner, sharper, less yielding than the smoky opacity inside. You look up. Even though no great sun has yet risen, you can sense the potential of its warmth pressing down from behind the eastern hills. This anticipation makes the air feel different, lighter. The ground beneath your feet is packed dirt mixed with loose grit and small flakes of dry leaves. The texture shifts underfoot as you walk a few paces away from the doorway. You become aware of the weight of the passing hours, not in terms of tasks left undone, but simply in the slow inevitability of time moving, no matter how much stillness surrounds it. You begin your quiet journey toward the edge of the settlement, the general direction of the town well and the main thoroughfare. You observe the outer edges of the village architecture, the rough-hewn stones forming the low walls, coated in moss that holds the deep green color of enduring moisture. These buildings seem built to withstand time itself, their lines softened by centuries of human living. You walk with a slow, considered gait, finding balance and rhythm in your feet's contact with the cool ground. You notice how other dwellings share a similar construction, each one seemingly absorbing the coolness and shadow until dawn truly arrives. The air carries the distinct scent now, less wood smoke, more damp stone, mixed perhaps with the fainter, sharper tang of livestock gathered nearby. As you near the open square, the central hub where life eventually congregates, you slow your steps further. You take in the scene not as a set of items or people, but as a composite texture of muted colors and faint movements. A shawl draped over a low wall catches the light just so. A bucket rests against a weathered post, its wood bleached silver by time. The simple act of pausing allows you to gather your senses fully into the moment. You listen for sounds that are not conversation. The distant clanging sound, perhaps, from the blacksmith's workshop beginning to stir, or the soft, rhythmic thump of a wooden cart wheel rolling on uneven stone. These background sounds form a quiet tapestry against which all other moments will be strung. You reach the periphery of the well area. The air here feels cooler still, scrubbed clean by the proximity of water. You pause before the heavy structure of the pulley mechanism. Its wood is dark, polished smooth not just by handling, but perhaps by a long-ago oil or sealant that now seems part of its ancient patina. Even though you are not lifting buckets yet, your hands hover near the cool metal handles of the winch system. You observe the geometry of the pulley, the careful intersection of lines and curves built for repetitive action. It is designed for efficiency and resilience, a mechanical metaphor for the persistence of village life itself. You stand quietly, taking one deep breath that draws in the sharp, metallic smell of clean water mingling with the damp stone dust. You are suspended in this moment of waiting, a quiet preparation for the more physical tasks that define the day's gentle rhythm. You leave the immediate shelter of your home, moving toward the main thoroughfare. The transition is marked by a subtle shift in temperature. The cool, contained air of the dwelling gives way to the sharper, more open chill of early morning. You notice how the slight breeze carries the distinct, mingled sense of the town waking up. The sharp tang of unwashed wool and leather from passing laborers mixed with the sweeter, yeasty smell of bread baking hours away. And underlying it all, the damp, mineral scent rising from the cobblestones. The path itself is uneven beneath your feet. You pay attention to the way your bare soles or worn leather shoes meet the flagstones. The subtle dip here, the slight lift there. Each stone seems steeped in untold passage, cooled by the night and warmed by the slow creep of the nascent day. As you walk, you observe the other dwellings lining the street. Their roofs are a mosaic of weathered slate and patched clay tiles. Some beams jut out precariously over the narrow walkways, creating pockets of deep shadow that contrast sharply with the increasingly diffused gray light filtering down from the sky. You find yourself near the central gathering point, drawn by the gravitational pull toward the large stone structure housing the well. The area feels different here, less enclosed, more open to the sweep of the morning air. A few figures are already gathered, moving with the characteristic unhurried tempo of those who know this place intimately. There is a silent choreography to their movements. No one bumps into another, and even the necessary clanking sounds seem orchestrated by habit rather than haste. The well itself dominates the space. It is a solid, circular monument of local stone, its moss-covered lip worn smooth by centuries of hands pulling ropes. You approach it slowly, feeling the coolness radiating from the surrounding stonework. The air here feels thicker, somehow charged with the history of pure necessity. You draw your pail closer to the edge. The metal handle is cold against your fingertips, a grounding chill that pulls your focus immediately into the present moment. Nearby, an elderly woman is already performing the task, her movements economical and practiced. You watch the rhythm. She attaches the rope to the winding mechanism, braces herself slightly, and waits for the steady weight of the water-filled bucket below. The sound begins with a distinct creak, a groan of old timber machinery responding to years of labor. The effort requires patience. Your turn comes when the pail is empty. You take your end of the rope, feeling the rough hemp fibers against your hands. It feels heavier than it looks. You brace your feet slightly apart and give a steady pull, drawing up slack until you feel the weight change deep in the shaft. The initial lift is smooth but demanding. The bucket rises slowly, creaking rhythmically as if complaining of its arduous task. The sound then shifts to the splash, a cool, sudden impact against your waiting palms or into the metal basin placed at your feet. It is a clean, utterly refreshing shock that instantly washes away any lingering warmth or sluggishness from the morning's early hours. You pause, allowing yourself to feel the water trickle across your skin, noting its temperature and its density. It smells purely of earth and deep rock, mineral-rich and profoundly vital. You fill your pail slowly, maneuvering the bucket until it settles with a decisive, satisfying slosh. The weight is substantial now, pulling gently at your arms. As you pull the rope back up, the resistance feels different from the initial lift. It speaks of fullness, of utility. You release the mechanism and step away from the well's edge, taking a deep breath that draws in the mingled scents. The wet stone, the fresh water, and the faint wood smoke clinging to the nearby laundry lines. Observing your neighbors, you notice the details of their routines. A young man is not struggling with his bucket. He seems to find satisfaction in the rhythm itself, humming a quiet, tuneless melody as the rope creaks out its song. Across the way, a father watches his child playing near the well's edge, pointing at something on the stone surface, teaching them perhaps about erosion or the subtle patterns left by passing boots. These small interactions are not dramatic events. They are simply facets of shared endurance. You realize that this entire act, the gathering, the pulling, the splashing, is a quiet meditation performed by everyone who needs sustenance for the day ahead. There is an inherent economy in motion here. No wasted effort, no unnecessary speech, only the necessary exchange between human need and natural resource. Turning away from the cool mouth of the well, you feel a subtle shift in your own demeanor. The initial morning stiffness seems to have been washed out by the cold shock and the physical repetition. You walk slowly past some stacked baskets overflowing with root vegetables, the deep purples of purple cabbage, the earthy browns of turnips, awaiting transport to market. You brush aside a stray piece of dried straw that flutters near your ankle, noticing how resilient the grasses are, even in this cleared passage. The lingering feeling from the well is one of profound grounding. The water feels like it has reset something within you, clearing the haze of sleep and drawing attention to the simplest necessities of life. Clean water, steady labor, and structured routine. This foundational ritual seems to prepare you not just for the day's tasks, but for the simple art of being present in the body and in the moment. The coolness lingering on your skin tells you the day has barely begun. You are settled back within the quiet enclosure of your home, a place built of sturdy timber and packed earth that holds the last vestiges of morning's chill. Even though the immediate necessity of drawing water is finished, the rhythm of preparation remains paramount. There is no sudden shift in activity here, only a patient continuation. Your gaze drifts downward to the simple clothes laid out upon a woven mat. They are not garments of grand design or vibrant color. They are functional things, dyed with local roots and kept clean by countless washes. To touch them is to feel the history of your life layered into the fibers. The linen feels surprisingly smooth beneath your fingertips, worn down almost to an acceptance of comfort over appearance. You run your hand over a particular section of cloth near the elbow, a faint patchiness where a sleeve has been repaired before, and perhaps before that. The stitching is different from the others, thicker thread used by hands that were both skilled and hurried. These marks are not flaws, you notice with an unexpected clarity, but rather quiet chapters in the textile's long life, markers of belonging to this community through shared need. Observing these mends becomes a gentle meditation on endurance. It is a process of slow, careful dressing that emphasizes simplicity above all else. The coarse weave of the undergarment against your skin reminds you of the season and the labor involved in its creation, hands working patiently from local flax or hemp. You pull up the rough waistband of the skirt. It holds its shape not because of rigid stitching, but because of the accumulated weight of countless wears, a kind of settled memory woven into the fabric structure. You consider the overtunic you will wear today. Its muted gray tones seem to absorb the gentle light filtering through the oiled parchment window. You turn slowly, studying its drape. There is an almost architectural quality to the way it falls from your shoulders, simple lines designed only for movement and practicality. Yet, in that perfect neutrality lies a kind of quiet dignity. This garment does not shout or demand attention. It simply allows you to exist within the day without interruption. It is clothing that understands obligation, the gentle duties of the household, the necessary movements through the market square, the simple act of meeting neighbors for a brief exchange. The small stain on your apron, it is probably just vegetable juice mixed with absorbed sweat from yesterday's preparations. You do not feel the need to worry over it. Its presence anchors you in the present moment, reminding you that perfection is an expensive commodity, and life here favors honest weathering. The simple fact of wearing clothing that has seen use gives your appearance a kind of understated authenticity. As you adjust the folds around your waist, you are acutely aware of the subtle interplay between material and body. The slight stiffness of the starching in the collar, the way the rougher wool patches provide needed insulation against the lingering chill. The entire act feels less like preparation for outside appearance and more like assembling oneself into a state of calm readiness. It is an internal settling that manifests outwardly as composed stillness. You pause near the small shelf where your laundering tools rest. A basin, hardened wood scrapers, neatly folded bundles of clean linen awaiting their turn to dry in the sun's later heat. Everything here speaks of deliberate care and sustained economy. The way you choose to fold a piece of cloth, making crisp edges that hold their shape, it mirrors the disciplined nature required by your day's tasks. The smells within the dwelling begin to shift slightly now that you are dressed. The clean scent of washed linen mingles with the persistent, underlying aroma of cooking wood smoke, overlaid with the fresh, yeasty smell drifting from a neighbor's open oven further down the alleyway. These overlapping scents map out the quiet geography of your life. Stepping away from the preparation mat and feeling the full sweep of the clothes settle around you, you notice how they resist the urge to become anything dramatic or memorable. They simply support the act of being present. This understanding, That true attractiveness in this setting is found not in ornamentation, but in quiet self-possession, is a profound lesson learned through mere necessity. The simple rhythm of your breathing seems to synchronize with the gentle shift of light across the rough plaster walls. You move past the window opening, and although you do not look outside immediately, the cool draft that brushes against your exposed skin confirms the persistent, subtle energy moving throughout the town. The day has begun its slow process of warming up, demanding only a composed presence from you. The clothes are merely secondary to the self-contained rhythm you carry within. They are simply the framework for the gentle obligations awaiting you. You move away from the mainstream of people, turning toward your own small work area. The space is modest, smelling faintly of drying herbs and cold stone. This corner has become a place of quiet industry for you over the passing seasons, and it feels solid beneath your worn boots. There is no expectation here, only the continuation of simple necessity. You find your tools arranged upon a low shelf near the cool wall, a grouping that tells its own subtle story of time past. You lift your hands slowly, feeling the weight in them, not from effort, but from anticipation. They are the instruments that have allowed you to participate in the slow rhythm of this life. You begin with the whetstone. It is flat and cool beneath your fingertips, a smooth slab of river rock darkened by decades of use. Running your fingers across its surface, you notice the subtle grain patterns, the way it absorbs faint moisture from the air. Lying beside it is a neatly folded piece of linen cloth, creamy white but softened to a delicate oatmeal hue. It has been washed countless times. Every fold and crease speaks of effort and care. You pick up a wooden handle, perhaps belonging to a small knife or an awl. The wood is dense, smelling sweetly of aged oak, polished by the oils from many hands before yours. You do not rush through this inventory. Instead, you examine each piece as if it were something precious, acknowledging its history. This is not merely preparation, it is a quiet meditation on endurance. The stone feels perfectly balanced in your palms. It has weight, a reassuring gravity that sinks into the bones of your arms. You recall when it was first acquired, perhaps from a traveling peddler who traded it for smoked fish or local grain. The memory settles lightly, like dust motes caught in a sunbeam. Next, you take up the wooden handle again. Running your thumb along its join lines, you feel the minuscule imperfections, where the wood has swelled slightly, where a tiny knot has darkened the surface. These signs of use are not flaws to be corrected, but markers of service. They prove that this object, and by extension yourself, is rooted in time. You settle onto your low stool, allowing your back to rest against the rough texture of the stone wall. Taking a slow breath deep into your lungs, a movement that seems disproportionately large in the quiet space, you observe the play of light filtering through the small window opening. The late morning sun is beginning its slow climb, casting sharp-edged geometric patterns onto the dirt floor and dusty workbench. There is an understanding at this moment. These tools are extensions of your intention. They do not dictate the end result, but they make the path toward it manageable. You gently test the whetstone against the smooth wood of the bench, listening to the quiet, low shush sound it makes. It is a natural, satisfying sound, the sound of something being properly maintained. You consider the concept of readiness itself. Being prepared does not mean being ready for sudden commotion or high drama. It means being attuned to the steady, predictable flow of everyday life. It means knowing the precise resistance of metal against stone, the specific smell of beeswax polish on oiled wood, the satisfying weight of a well-used implement. Your fingers brush lightly across the edge of the whetstone. You notice how minute specks of rust or mineral deposits cling to the edges, tiny evidences of its previous existence in damp air. This wear is simply part of what makes it trustworthy. You pick up your cleaning cloth and gently wipe the stone's surface. The cloth feels rough yet absorbent beneath your touch. The act of cleaning becomes slow and deliberate. Each stroke is economical, following the curve and plane of the rock. It is a mindful erasure, not of the grit, but of any pretense that might suggest imperfection or haste. You look down at the tools laid out before you, the whetstone, the cloth, the wooden handle. They rest in perfect repose, waiting for your focus to breathe life back into them. There is a sense of quiet authority emanating from this simple tableau. It speaks not of grand skill, but of enduring patience. This preparation does not feel like homework. It feels like a conversation with materials, a dialogue built on years of mutual respect. You realize that true competence, the kind that allows you to craft something beautiful or repair something needed, is less about innate talent and more about this methodical, respectful tending of your means. You might pause here for a moment, simply enjoying the quiet acoustics of the space, the distant, muffled clang from another craftsman working in an adjacent alleyway, the faint, almost imperceptible scent of baking bread carried on the slight breeze. These background noises are not distractions, but the backdrop against which your private ritual unfolds. The rhythmic settling of dust motes in the sunbeams reminds you that everything moves slowly here, following the cycles of light and need. You feel a calm center forming within you, rooted by this methodical inspection. The whetstone rests still, waiting only for the decisive scrape, and you settle into a posture of quiet anticipation, ready to begin the deep work, letting the tools themselves guide your initial, thoughtful movements. The rhythmic sounds of your craft settle around you, a quiet hum that seems to absorb the edges of the day. You continue the motion, the patient scrape of metal on whetstone, or the steady pull of the thread through the loop. It is a focused effort, yet paradoxically, it feels like floating. The world outside this small workspace seems to soften at the periphery, losing its sharp corners and hurried edges. Your breath finds an easy, deep pattern, matching the rhythm you create with your hands. You pause now, merely for a moment of sustained stillness, letting the accumulated movements rest in your sinew and bone. You notice the fine grit clinging beneath your fingernails, the faint reddish dust mixed with the pale slivers of wood shavings on the wooden floor before you. These small remnants are evidence of time passing, of effort spent, but not wasted. They speak only of presence. The air itself carries a specific composition, the dry scent of ground meal mingling with the vegetal sharpness of nearby leaves, undercut by the sweet, persistent aroma of drying herbs hung high from the rafters. You take a slow breath, cataloging the smells. The memory of yesterday's fire smoke still lingers faintly on your tunic sleeve. It is a layered history of this place, breathed into you through simple inhalation. Your attention drifts outward, past the immediate circle of your labor. The sun, though higher now than it was at dawn, does not beat down with aggressive force. Rather, it filters through the gaps between the adjacent roofs and walls in soft, segmented patches of light. You observe how the dust motes catch these shafts, dancing miniature constellations that move with a near-silent, random grace. They are mesmerizing, these invisible particles suspended in time. Lifting your gaze slightly, you consider the texture of the surrounding architecture. The stone upon which you lean is cool and porous to the touch, bearing the patina of countless rains and hands. You notice how the mortar lines have weathered differently, some filled in with fresh lime washes, others crumbling back into gritty earth. Each patch tells a silent story of necessary maintenance and gradual decay, of human persistence against slow geologic time. Your mind begins to quiet, settling into the easy flow achieved by repetitive motion. The need for intense thought diminishes. Contemplation arises naturally from the consistency of the task. You find yourself measuring not in minutes or hours, but in cycles of effort. A pass back and forth with the tool, a steady pull followed by a soft release of tension. This physical metronome governs your inner state. The work is cyclical, mirroring the dependable rhythm of life here, the slow rise of the sun, the midday lull, the evening preparation. It demands focus without demanding panic. You are sustained by small increments of concentration, letting the immediate physical feedback guide you. If the wood grain resists too much, you adjust the angle. If the thread snags slightly, you gently ease it free with a steady fingertip. You become attuned to sounds that were previously unnoticed. The very soft clicking of your tool against its resting surface when you briefly pause. The distant bleating of sheep from the upper grazing lands. A child's laugh, faint and drifting, carried on the slight breath of the air. These sounds do not interrupt the work. They merely punctuate its quiet, steady rhythm. Remembering that this task is simply an act of keeping busy, an enduring necessity, you feel a gentle satisfaction settle within your chest. This craft, whatever it may be, connects you to generations who performed it before you and will perform it after you. It anchors you not in grand ideals or fleeting glories, but in the steady weight of human survival. You shift slightly on your stool, feeling the familiar stiffness dissipate with the continued action. The effort becomes almost effortless, a second nature returning fully to your hands. You are immersed wholly in this small corner of creation, a bubble of focused industry amidst the slow drift of village time. This immersion teaches you the profound quietude that can exist right beside visible activity, a deep stillness found when you commit yourself entirely to the immediate moment and the predictable arc of matter changing under steady intention. The sunlight shifts again, casting longer shadows from the tools arranged neatly near your elbow. You notice how these elongated forms stretch across the patterned earthen floor, mimicking the passage of time itself. A subtle visual reminder that movement is constant, even when you yourself seek a deep state of quietude within the task. You turn away from the cool stone lip of the well and begin your walk, letting the damp morning air settle around you. The path underfoot is uneven earth packed hard by countless sandals, smelling faintly of animal waste and last night's cooking fires. The light has changed since the market was first stirring to life. It is no longer the stark gray of dawn, but a softer, diffused wash that seems to fall into everything equally. You walk slowly, adjusting your pace not for an audience, but simply to let your feet find their comfortable rhythm on the familiar ground. The weight of the day does not press down, but rather settles around you like a comforting mantle. The smells are strongest now that you move toward the central square. There is the sharp tang of fermenting fruit mixed with something smoky and sweet, perhaps baked honey cakes or roasting nuts. Beneath these stronger scents lies the constant, earthy perfume of people. Dust, damp wood, woven fibers, and warm skin. You find yourself drifting into the flow of the market without any specific destination in mind. Your gaze drifts over baskets piled high with root vegetables, their skins muted by earth and storage. You note the deep reds of freshly harvested beetroot and the dull golds of potatoes wrapped tightly in leaves. Each item seems to speak of where it came from, a slow journey from field to stall. The merchant stacking the roots has calloused hands, scarred slightly at the knuckles, and he handles each basket with practiced slowness. You observe how the slight effort required for his work lends an undeniable gravity to his presence. It is not merely trade. It seems a ritual of provision. You pass by a stall draped in richly colored fabrics, indigo dyes mixed with dusty saffron yellows. The cloth, stacked neatly, catches the gentle illumination and reflects it back faintly. Running your hand out into the air, you consider the texture of the linen on your own sleeves. Yours is sturdy, practical, and matte, designed for living, not merely showing. As you move deeper into the square, the sounds become a soft tapestry of life. It begins with the rhythmic calling of voices, low and melodic, advertising goods. Fresh bread here, eggs still warm. These calls do not sound like attempts to draw attention, but rather quiet statements of fact, woven into the steady background hum. You slow your pace entirely near a stall overflowing with dried herbs. The air around this particular stand is markedly different, scented intensely with thyme and rosemary, dry and sharp. You look closely at the drying bundles. Some leaves are curled in on themselves from the sun's intensity. Others hang still, preserved by careful arrangement. You notice how these small natural treasures hold memories of seasons past. The movement through this heart of exchange is one of endless, gentle observation. People move with purpose, but their movements are always modulated by a shared understanding of rhythm and patience. A mother guides a small child whose hands reach out to touch the stacked pyramids of gourds. The child pauses briefly, tracing the bumpy surface with a curious finger before being gently pulled onward by the parent's elbow. You watch an elderly man sitting on a low stone bench near the edge of the square. He is watching nothing in particular. His gaze seems focused just beyond the hustle, perhaps fixed on the way the morning light grazes the mortar lines of the surrounding buildings. His posture suggests decades spent witnessing these very same market rhythms. The sheer abundance of small, unconnected details becomes overwhelming only when you try to collect them all at once. Instead, you let your attention settle like dust motes in a sunbeam. On the intricate way the vendor has stacked small terracotta pots. On the way a ripple disturbs the dusty edge of the central paving stone. On the slight sheen of sweat collecting along the temple of passing people. This walking is not about arriving anywhere specific. It is simply about being suspended in the present moment, acknowledging that the structure and comfort of life are found within these slow cycles. The buying, the selling, the observing. You realize that true attractiveness, or perhaps more accurately inner composure, comes from this practiced patience. The market moves around you, a flowing tide of necessity and small pleasure. It takes nothing to simply absorb it all. The vibrant splashes of color on bolts of cloth, the deep concentration etched onto a baker's forehead as he works nearby, the simple act of passing baskets back and forth. You feel the steady weight of your own clothing, reassuringly worn in its places, speaking of days already lived. Your rhythm slows further, becoming indistinguishable from the overall tempo of the square. You are part of the background hum now, an observer existing gracefully within the machinery of everyday life. The slow walk itself becomes the quiet education, confirming that presence is the most compelling commodity of all. The day has settled into a gentle, mid-morning rhythm. You find yourself near the central thoroughfare, where life unfolds with an unhurried grace. There is no agenda for this moment, only the natural pull toward the quiet observation of your neighbor's routines. You move slowly now, letting the subtle shifting light guide you. The air here feels different than at the well. It carries a warmer blend of roasting grains and distant wood smoke, mingling with the faint scent of wool and dried herbs. You pause near a low stone wall that marks the boundary between two properties. The stones are warm to the touch under your fingertips, smoothed by countless passing hands over many generations. Sitting here, you become part of the background tapestry, a quiet witness to the ongoing flow of life. You simply observe the patterns around you. A small child darts across the packed earth path, chasing a flight of iridescent pigeons that scatter upwards in a sudden flutter. Their laughter, high and brief, mixes with the low murmur of voices nearby. The boy who was chasing them finally stumbles slightly, catching himself by the edge of his mother's skirt. You notice the faded dye on her outer garment, the way it has softened over years of sun and wash, telling a silent story of resilience. You let your gaze drift past the details. The basket full of deep purple figs tied to the porch railing, the way an elderly woman sits on a low stool, painstakingly sorting through nuts, the careful tilt of a man's head as he speaks to a vendor. Each moment is layered with quiet routine. There is no dramatic unfolding, only the accumulation of gentle, predictable gestures. The soundscape itself becomes a study in calm resonance. You hear the soft thunk of sacks being moved, the scrape of wooden cart wheels on stone, the occasional clink of pottery. These sounds are not jarring interruptions, but rather elements that establish the deep, steady pulse of community life. They remind you that this place has functioned like this for so long, a comforting cycle marked by necessity and habit. Eventually, your attention turns towards a section where several simple wooden tables have been laid out on shared ground. It is an informal gathering spot, a space for those who gather meagerly what they need to share. A few neighbors are already present, taking their positions with practiced ease. Some sit on woven mats spread over the cool earth. Others find places on the low, sturdy benches built into the side of the buildings. You draw closer, not needing to speak or engage immediately, but simply allowing your presence to settle into the quiet geometry of the scene. There is a shared sense of stillness here, punctuated by small movements, the careful placement of an empty bowl, the slow unfolding of woven cloth. This communal space suggests a deep-seated understanding of mutual reliance. As you approach the simple table, you observe the food laid out. It is not a display of wealth, but one of sufficiency. Thick slices of dark, crusty bread, piles of root vegetables with skins still clinging to them, bowls containing various pickled items. There are few embellishments, which makes the plainness itself feel profoundly satisfying. The air surrounding this shared meal carries an intoxicating mix of scents. The yeasty tang of baked bread cooling on stone, the mineral scent of damp earth mixed with vegetable steam, and perhaps the faintest hint of wood smoke clinging to everyone's clothes. These aromas are inseparable from the rhythm of communal sustenance, marking a pause in the day's physical labor. When you finally settle down at the edge of this informal gathering, you take your time. You do not rush to break bread or engage in rapid conversation. Instead, you simply sit and watch the interplay between light and objects. The way the mid-morning sun angles across the rough linen tablecloth, how it illuminates dust motes rising gently from the packed earth floor, the deep, satisfying texture of a piece of worn pottery. There is an unspoken agreement in this shared space. That observation can be a form of participation. It requires nothing but quiet attention and acceptance of the moment's pace. You take a portion of bread, it feels heavy and imperfectly cut, showing its history on the crust sides. The warmth from it radiates faintly against your fingertips. The first moments are marked by silence, but this is not an awkward void. It is a comfortable quiet, woven from shared patience. Nearby, an older man is mending a fishing net, his fingers working with slow, precise dedication, dropping the occasional brightly colored knot into place. You watch the movement of his hands, the economy and practiced grace that comes only from years of doing one thing over and over again. Savoring the bread is a quiet ritual in itself. You notice how the crust gives way easily under light pressure, revealing the soft, dense crumb within. The taste is simple, earthy, slightly sour, and profoundly grounding. It tastes of grain, water, and time. As you break it slowly, observing the crumbs fall onto the shared surface, your thoughts settle into the gentle current of the day. You consider how these small moments define life here, not by great events or grand declarations, but by this quiet rhythm of sharing, gathering sustenance, and simply being near one another. Attractiveness, you realize in this unhurried setting, is less about external presentation and more about internal composure, the ability to exist fully within a given moment. As the meal continues at its gentle pace, conversation occasionally drifts between neighbors. They speak of crops that struggled with late rains, or the changing price of salt, or simple recollections of their childhoods. You listen not just for the words, but for the cadence, the rise and fall of voices shaped by daily life under a warm sun. You find yourself reflecting on the value of shared meals when they are so unpretentious. They strip away pretense. Here, people gather because they must nourish themselves, and in that necessity, they find connection. The lingering quiet after a passing comment is often more communicative than any shouted remark could ever be. The sunlight continues its steady climb toward its zenith, bathing the entire communal area in a bright, golden light. This light does not demand attention. It simply illuminates what is already there. The wear on the wooden benches, the faint dust collecting in the eaves of the adjacent house, the subtle sheen on the polished stone pathway. You observe how this consistent natural light dictates everything. When shadows deepen, when heat rises, and when sustenance must be shared. This quiet observance of neighborly life reinforces a gentle truth about your own existence. To simply participate in the rhythm, to breathe with the pace of others, to share a simple meal without fanfare, to find satisfaction in the functional beauty of routine, is itself a deeply grounding and quietly compelling form of being. You rest now against the coolness of the stone wall behind you, feeling the soft ache of gentle activity settling into your limbs, content simply to watch the slow, beautiful continuation of days turning into evenings. You draw a slow breath, letting the cool air settle deep into your lungs. The previous tasks, the water, the simple dressing, the methodical work of the craft nearby, have left you with a quiet sense of contained energy. There is no urgent need to move. Time in this place seems less a measurement and more a thickening fluid that allows moments to spread out like dusk light over warm stone. Your attention shifts softly toward a patch of earth just outside your dwelling's door, bordered by rough-hewn planks. Here, life has taken root, a small tangle of things you tend. You kneel slowly on the ground, feeling the slightly uneven give of the earth beneath your knees. The air around this small garden space smells distinctly different from the general wood smoke and river scent. Here is a greener smell, sharp with damp chlorophyll and the delicate musk of life unfolding in its own time. This patch holds herbs, greens, and a few flowering weeds that thrive simply because you give them notice. You begin by gently inspecting the soil around the base of a cluster of mint leaves. The soil itself feels yielding, dark brown beneath your fingertips, a richness born of patient decay and renewal. You trace the pattern of tiny, velvety sprouts emerging from it. These herbs require nothing grand. They simply ask for gentle moisture and steady observation. Your movements are unhurried, deliberate as if you are greeting each plant individually. Sometimes, a small imperfection catches your eye, a leaf curled slightly at the edge, or perhaps a stem leaning too heavily to one side. You do not correct it harshly. Rather, you acknowledge its slight misalignment with a quiet thought, making yourself aware of the necessary equilibrium in all living things. Next, you gather a discarded piece of straw that has caught near a sprig of thyme. It is brittle under your touch, fragile evidence of something that was once robust, and now rests gently against the burgeoning life. You run your fingers along the surface of the dried material, feeling its papery dryness contrasting with the supple resilience of the growing things around it. This contrast settles into a quiet philosophical space for you. The beauty resides not just in what flourishes, but also in recognizing the cycle of passing away that feeds new growth. The act is simply one of gentle maintenance, removing the dead so the living may breathe easily. You slowly pass your hands over the leaves of basil. They are thick and glossy, catching stray beams of mid-morning light. You notice how the texture varies from leaf to leaf. Some surfaces are deeply veined, others smoother, almost waxy. This requires a slow lowering of the gaze, an act of continuous visual investigation. Every vein structure speaks of sunlight captured over weeks. Every slight curl tells a story of recent humidity, or perhaps too much morning chill. It is not about making them perfect. It is simply about ensuring their continued peaceful existence. From the herbs, your attention moves slightly outward, toward a braided vine that spills over an old stone step near the dwelling's entrance. This vine, perhaps jasmine or some local climbing variety, has grown wild in parts, its tendrils reaching out with casual determination. You notice the fine, woody hairs on the stalks and the way they catch morning dew, giving them a momentary sparkle before the heat of the day settles over them. When you touch it, there is a subtle resistance, a slight springiness to the growth that reminds you of persistent, quiet effort. The vine does not struggle violently. It simply persists, guiding itself toward the nearest source of stability and light. You spend a comfortable time weaving your fingers through some of the more established runners. It feels like untangling very fine, woody yarn, a small physical act requiring patience and gentleness. As you work, you become intensely aware of the smells, the bright sharpness of the basil mingling with the dusty, earthy scent kicked up by your movement, underscored by the deeper, sweet fragrance of the jasmine unfolding around you. These aromas anchor you completely to this specific spot in time and space. After tending the plants for a long while, there is a subtle shift in your focus, a gentle redirection that does not involve leaving the immediate area. You notice the small terracotta pot holding a few potted rosemary sprigs placed near the stone step. The needles are stiff, dark green, smelling strongly and sweetly of piney earth even when dry. They hold a persistent scent memory that accompanies you through the day. Running your fingers over one thick cluster of needled branches feels like touching something wonderfully sturdy and enduring. This sturdiness is perhaps what draws your thoughts back to the central theme. How true composure, how attractive presence, comes from sustained, low-effort attention to things, whether they are plants, tools, or people. The caregiving act you perform here is therefore deeply cyclical. It asks for nothing dramatic. It merely requires that you remember, and then gently adjust, the minor balance of small ecosystems. The beauty found in this repetitive, humble nurturing mirrors the quiet dignity required to simply inhabit a life with grace. Sustained awareness without grand gestures. You eventually rise from your kneeling position slowly, feeling the cool dampness of the earth against your palms. You take one last deep breath of the herbal sweet air, letting the scent adhere to your clothing and hair. This small act of tending reinforces a deep satisfaction, not because something was achieved or perfected, but simply because you had allowed yourself the quiet time required for profound observation, allowing yourself to be completely present in the simple act of caring. The high point of the sun, when it presses down on everything, is a different kind of light. It does not slant or whisper. It simply exists, solid and relentless overhead, warming the back of your neck until you feel slightly flushed. The air has changed since the morning's damp cool, losing that earthy scent to something thicker, heavier. The smell of dry dust mixing with accumulated heat, and the faint sweetness of cooked foodstuffs from passing kitchens. You notice this change in the way the sounds carry. They are sharper now, bouncing off the pale stone walls and seeming more immediate, less diffuse than they were near the well earlier. A steady hum underlies the daily rhythm, the muted murmur of voices, the clatter that comes sometimes from cartwheels on uneven cobbles, the occasional sharp cry of a vendor calling out prices. You instinctively seek a pocket of cooler air. Your gaze travels upward and sideways, scanning the buildings that define this narrow streetscape. Finally, your eyes settle on an overhang, a stretch of cool shadow cast by a lower roofline, or perhaps under a wide wooden awning attached to a merchant's stall. Moving toward it is not a goal in itself, but rather a quiet acknowledgement of the body's need for respite. Your footsteps slow almost imperceptibly as you walk beneath this continuous curtain of shade. The immediate shift is profound. The intense brilliance on the street outside seems to soften at your edges, muted by the cool, filtering effect of the shadow-casting architecture. Once settled in that patch of coolness, you allow yourself to sink down onto a low ledge or simply lean against the cool stone wall. You do not immediately rest, but rather settle into an attitude of profound stillness. Your spine straightens slightly, your shoulders relax, and the small tension held throughout the morning, the careful alertness required for every movement, begins to dissipate slowly. This shade is more than just coolness. It feels like a pause button pressed upon the relentless flow of the day. You observe the way the light interacts with the edges of this cool space. Where the intense sun hits the unshaded cobbles, the stone looks almost bleached white, reflecting all that fierce energy back up to your feet. But here, in the shadow, the colors deepen slightly. The ochre of the plaster walls gain a richer tone, and the deep blue painted beneath the eave seems impossibly saturated against the washed-out sunlight beyond. You realize how much effort is required simply to be still when the world around you continues its steady, low hum of life. The occasional passing worker or family unit seems unaware that you are deliberately taking up space purely for rest. Your attention drifts upward, following the path of the sky where it meets the unseen corner roof. You notice the slow drift of clouds, magnificent and effortless in their passage. They seem weighted with moisture, moving over the terracotta rooftops like vast, white ships sailing across an invisible sea. This movement, so gradual yet constant, acts as a calming counterpoint to the more abrupt, human motions happening below. The occasional whisper of wind through the eaves or beneath the wooden awnings is enough to break your focus gently, prompting you back to the quiet reality of your present location. You shift slightly against the stone, testing its temperature. It retains the day's heat in places while radiating a persistent coolness from others, a pleasing mosaic of contrasting sensations against your skin and clothing. You inhale slowly, drawing the filtered air deep into your lungs. The scent here is different from the sharp tang of the well or the dusty warmth of the market. It is a composite aroma, the mustiness of cool stone mixing with dry dust, and perhaps the faintest hint of lavender carried on the subtle breeze. These layered smells anchor you firmly to this moment. There is a profound quietude that accompanies such periods of necessary stillness. It is not merely the absence of noise, but rather an internal settling, a reduction in mental chatter that usually accompanies the effort of routine life. You find yourself observing small details with unusual clarity. The precise pattern of weathering on a wooden plank, how mortar has crumbled away from a corner block over decades of heat and rain, the way a stray thread unravels slowly from the hem of a neighbor's shawl left hanging to dry. These signs of enduring time are everywhere, whispering histories into your quiet awareness. It feels as though the life cycles of the community operate on this principle: pause, replenish, then resume. The midday break is not an interruption. It is a fundamental component of the day's structure, a necessary negotiation with the intense power of the sun. As you sit here, basking in the filtered respite, you feel your own internal rhythm slowing to match the gentle tempo of the drifting clouds above and the persistent hush of the cool stone supporting your back. Your mind naturally drifts back toward the simple beauty of remaining present. You reflect on how much energy is expended throughout the morning. The effort of rising, the walk, the labor of preparing, the quiet intensity of craft. The need to simply stop and be still becomes not a luxury, but an act of profound self-care, necessary for maintaining the delicate balance of your everyday existence. The weight of expectation, the perceived pressure to always be moving or producing something tangible, seems to lift slightly under the encompassing shade. You recognize that true attractiveness in this life is not displayed through elaborate gestures or vivid color, but through a certain composure, a visible ease that suggests you are well-versed in the rhythm of waiting and resting. It is the quiet assurance of one who knows their own necessary moments. You watch the slow passage of time, marked only by the slight shifting quality of light as the sun inches higher, refusing to yield its full power even under cloud cover. This period teaches you that strength can be found not in constant exertion, but in the art of patient reception, in simply sitting within the necessary silence, breathing in the cool air, and acknowledging the quiet dignity of a well-earned pause. The midday heat has settled over the cobbled ways, a warmth that does not press down so much as it seems to seep into the very stones beneath your worn soles. You walk slowly now, a meandering path through an area slightly removed from the main square, a place where commerce is less intense and life follows a quieter rhythm. Your purpose in walking is not defined. It is simply to continue the gentle movement that requires nothing of you but your attention. Ahead, you notice a figure seated on a low stone bench near the mouth of an alleyway, partially obscured by the drooping leaves of a grape arbor. The person appears older, wrapped in layers of muted, practical cloth that speak of seasons lived and endured. As you draw closer, their presence does not demand recognition. It simply exists, absorbing the quiet weight of your passing. The afternoon light begins to change, softening from the harsh glare of midday. You notice how the shadows, which had been so sharp and defined beneath the eaves, are now growing longer and more diffuse, stretching across the uneven flagstones of your dwelling's courtyard. The air carries a different weight than it did at noon. It is losing its intense heat, taking on the humid promise of evening rest. You feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere, an unspoken change that signals the winding down of day's great exertions. This is the time for return, for the necessary rituals of sustenance. A gentle warmth begins to emanate from your small hearth area, mixing with the cooler air approaching. Perhaps it is the scent of burning oak or dried herbs, but it speaks immediately of preparation and comfort. You begin to move toward the kitchen space, a room scented perpetually with baked grain and slow wood smoke. The sounds here are different now, not the boisterous clatter of commerce you heard at the market, nor the sharp rhythm of the midday craftwork, but quieter, more contained noises. There is the soft thud of wooden bowls against stonework surfaces, the gentle scrape of a knife across a chopping block, and the occasional muffled groan as something heavy settles into place. You are preparing for supper, a meal that requires patience almost by definition. You know which pots need attending, which greens will be best stewed slowly in earthenware vessels over low coals. The act itself is deeply rhythmic, rinsing root vegetables under a slow trickle of water, the repetitive motions of peeling herbs, or gathering firewood that must last through the cooling hours. Each movement is measured, designed not with haste, but with economy and care. As you work, your senses become highly attuned to the subtle shifts in aroma. The initial sharp smell of raw earth gives way to something richer, more complex. The deep, sweet scent of slow-simmering greens, perhaps dock leaves or wild mustard greens gathered earlier, blended with the comforting, yeasty tang of baking bread that you saved from the morning's bake. You pause for a moment, inhaling deeply, letting the combination of wood smoke, boiled herbs, and warm flour settle in your chest. These smells are the smell of endurance, of life continuing its steady, unhurried cycle. The washing of the dishes is itself a quiet meditation. The water, scooped from a basin or perhaps fetched one last time from the well, feels cool on your wrists. You scrub the rough wooden bowls and flatbread platters, noticing the way the grime seems to cling stubbornly, a residue of the hours lived. As you rinse them under your fingertips, watching the suds swirl away, you think not of cleanliness for its own sake, but of the passing time that the washing represents, a clearing away of the day's accumulated minor messes, physical and emotional alike. When the meal is finally arranged, simple earthenware bowls set out on a sturdy wooden table, there is a distinct quietude. You do not see an abundance, but rather a deliberate sufficiency. The food does not need elaborate presentation. Its appeal lies in its steam, its dark color, the slight sheen of rendered fat upon the surface of the stewing pot. It speaks of practicality and community. As you take your place at the table, settling into the worn wood that has known countless similar evenings, you find a deep sense of anticipation. Not for delight or novelty, but for the steady comfort of companionship, even if that company is only shared with quiet silence. You notice the small details surrounding the meal, the grain in the dark wood of the table where generations have laid elbows and forearms, the way the flickering lantern light catches the tiny mica flecks embedded in the wall plaster, or the pattern of shadow cast by your own hand as you reach for a bowl. The eating itself is an exercise in deceleration. You do not rush through the nourishment. Instead, each bite becomes an event. You observe the texture of the thick loaf of bread, the yielding crumbliness that contrasts with the slightly sticky root vegetables accompanying it. You notice how the stew warms you from within, spreading a gentle heat through your limbs after the day's labors. You eat slowly, pausing between mouthfuls to simply taste the blend of spices and boiled leaf. You let the warmth settle into your stomach, feeling the physical evidence that sustains you for the following morning. This mindful pace is central to looking at life with a certain grace. It means truly appreciating the density of flavor in a humble bowl. It's an act of internal composure, demonstrating respect for the sustenance provided. The meal becomes a slow performance of presence. You are aware of your own breathing pattern, the natural rise and fall of your chest that synchronizes with the steady ticking sound emanating from some distant corner, or perhaps the soft, settling groan of the timbers in the cooling evening air. You focus on the feeling of the bowl's weight, the slightly gritty texture of the bread crust against your fingertips. If others are present, the silence shared across the table is not an absence of sound, but a gentle accumulation of small noises. The soft scrape of metal spoon against ceramic, the occasional whispered sigh, or the rhythmic chewing that accompanies deep contentment. These sounds are allowed to exist without filling any emotional void. They simply are. Afterward, as you finish the last pieces of bread, there is not an urge to clean up immediately, nor a need to depart quickly. Instead, you remain in the golden pool of lamplight for a time. The remnants of the supper, the empty dishes, the scattered crumbs, become part of the evening's quiet tableau. You sit and allow your gaze to follow the light source, watching the small flame dance against the dark curve of the wall, noting how its intensity seems to shrink and soften as the night gathers its deepening cloak outside. This prolonged moment of rest after sustenance is a core lesson in appearing composed. It teaches you that genuine presence involves savoring not just activity, but also the space between activities. You observe the fading colors bleeding into each other on the stone walls, the ochres darkening to burnt umber, the pale blues softening into a deep indigo hue. The day's stories are now quieted, gently folded away like unused linens in a chest. All that remains is this profound and utterly necessary sense of being anchored in the steady, predictable rhythm of life, preparation, sustenance, rest. You simply breathe with the enduring tempo of your village as the evening deepens around you. The day's necessary motions have settled into a steady rhythm, and now, as the deeper twilight begins to deepen outside your window, you prepare for the cleansing. You gather the dirty dishes used during the slow mealtime, a wooden bowl, perhaps a few ceramic plates, their surfaces bearing subtle scratches that tell stories of meals past. The smell of wood smoke lingers lightly on everything, mixed with the faint sweetness of stewed roots and cooling hearth ashes. This final chore feels like closing the book on the day's chapters. You move slowly to the washing area. The light here is softer than in the daytime square, filtered by a single flickering lantern casting elongated shadows upon the stone walls. You draw water from an ewer filled earlier. The bucket was cool and heavy against your wrist as you carried it back. The cool sensation of the water hitting your palms feels restorative, a quiet pause before the physical work begins. You start with scrubbing the vessels. You dampen a sturdy linen cloth, its fibers softened by repeated washing. The texture is familiar, almost like an extension of your own skin. As you begin to scrub the wood, you notice how water interacts with different materials. It lifts certain stains from the porous ceramic, but merely beads and slides off the oiled wooden handle. You feel a deep concentration settling over you, turning this mundane task into something profoundly meditative. Observing the grime, you are observing time itself. The streaks of reddish-brown residue scraped from the bottom of a bowl are not just remnants of dinner. They are tiny records of countless other meals eaten here, by many hands, under this same steady wash of lamplight. Each stain speaks quietly of nourishment and simple continuation. The water is cool and persistent against your skin, encouraging slow, deliberate movements. You scrub the plates until the surface gleams faintly in the low light. This requires an attention that cannot afford haste. If you rush, a spot will remain unnoticed, a piece of lingering imperfection. Your breath falls into a steady, calm pattern, matching the gentle slosh and scrape of your routine. You wash one object completely before reaching for the next. It is this sequential focus that steadies the mind, making the small act of washing feel like a complete ritual in itself. The chore continues until the accumulation of used vessels dwindles to nothingness. The smell of clean water and mild soap fills your immediate space, displacing the richer, heavier aromas of wood smoke and cooked food. This physical cleansing feels like shedding the day's invisible weight, the small worries accumulated from watching neighbors or managing a simple household budget. Later, perhaps when the chores are fully done, you move toward the bathing basin if one is available to your dwelling. The water here must be drawn again, still cool against your skin, but now it carries the scent of fresh soap and stone, rather than only earth and wood smoke. You enter slowly, feeling the weight of the day's physical shell, the settled dust on your elbows, the faint residue of the market air clinging to your hair. The act of washing your body is surprisingly slow. Water runs over you in sheets, tracing patterns down the familiar paths of your limbs. You focus not on appearing clean for others, but on feeling that deep sense of completeness. Every corner, every fold of linen, every joint requires a deliberate touch. It is an inventory of self. You notice the coolness of the stone basin beneath you, grounding you to the reality of the present moment. The slight friction of your scrubbing hands against your skin keeps your focus taut and engaged. You wash away not just dirt, but the tension that gathers in the shoulders from simply being present all day long. As you rinse, watching the murky water drain slowly into the trough below, you reflect on the concept of dust. It is everything. The dust from the ground you walked on this morning, the fine motes kicked up by passing feet in the market, the subtle grime that settles into the creases of your skin over a day's labor. Washing away the day's dust is literally and figuratively an act of setting yourself back to neutral. It resets the mind. The quiet solitude of this washing time allows lingering thoughts, the small exchanges with neighbors, the taste of yesterday's bread, the steady rhythm of the loom earlier in the morning, to settle into a calm background hum. You are not actively thinking about anything in particular. You are simply existing within the sensory details. The temperature shift as you emerge from the water, the faint tingling sensation on your skin, the satisfying scent of washed stone. You wrap yourself carefully in dry linens. The cloth feels exceptionally soft against your skin, a tactile reminder of the self-maintenance inherent in daily life. You perform one final sweeping motion around the washing area, gathering fallen scraps and stray dust, ensuring that the space is as clean as you feel within it. This quiet order reflects an internal calm. The entire process demands patience, a sustained slowness that resists the urgency of modern expectation. It teaches that true renewal does not come from grand gestures or dramatic changes, but from the methodical completion of necessary, humble tasks. You are ready to transition through the deepening hours, having washed away every physical trace and many a mental residue of the long day. You settle back into the quiet space of your home, or perhaps find a spot near an open window where you can face the western sky. The day's steady activities have ebbed away, leaving behind a deep and profound silence that is not empty, but full of cooling air, muted scents, and the promise of deepening night. You do not need to look at anything specific. Merely existing in this transition is enough. This waiting is, itself, an act of graceful composure. The initial color outside is a deep, softened blue, far removed from the harsh, bright light of midday or even the gentle gray of dawn. It is the color that speaks of pause, of closing cycles. The air cools slowly around you, a perceptible shift in temperature that settles over your skin and the stone floor beneath your feet. You notice how the edges of everything seem to blur slightly, softened by this unique twilight atmosphere. You rest your gaze on the horizon line, where the blue sky gradually merges with the darkening wash of fields beyond the settlement walls. There is no dramatic spectacle here, only a slow yielding to night. The deepest indigo seems to soak up all available light, pulling it down into itself like water draining from a bowl. This gradual deepening demands nothing of you. It simply happens, and you are present enough to observe its quiet passing. The smells of the day, the lingering wood smoke from cooking fires, the mixed scents of damp earth from the market, the faint yeasty sweetness of baking bread are still present but are changing. They are melding together, becoming richer, heavier, settling close to the ground. You can smell the cooling stone of the houses, too, a clean, mineral scent that speaks of permanence and long endurance. This blend of smells anchors you quietly in time. You draw your breath, noticing its steady rhythm against the hushed backdrop. It is an unhurried process. Inhale, feel the cool, slightly moist air filling your lungs, then exhale slowly, letting go of any small tension held throughout the day. With each measured breath, you deepen your sense of stillness, achieving a meditative state born simply from patience. The first sign that true night approaches is often subtle. It may be a single bird calling its evening note, a rhythmic creak of an animal settling for the night, or perhaps the distant, muffled sound of voices fading into sleep down the alleyway. You listen to these small sounds, classifying them not by their origin, but by the quiet rhythm they impose on your immediate state of being. The light plays across the rough-hewn walls around you. Where patches of remaining twilight hit the stucco or the aged wood, the colors are muted and soft. You observe how architectural details that were sharp in daylight, a chipped corner, a weathered beam, a groove carved by decades of hands, now seem softened, almost wearing an ethereal patina under the fading light. As your focus lingers on the sky, you begin to look upwards, past the low rooftops and surrounding hills. The blue deepens until it reaches that specific shade just before stars appear, a color often described as celestial indigo. It feels profoundly calming, a vast, steady depth above the immediate worries of human existence. The scattered glow of lamps beginning to flicker in the windows opposite you adds small points of golden warmth to the encroaching cool blues and grays. These tiny beacons suggest life continuing within defined walls, insulated from the wilder expanse of the night sky. You do not judge them. They are simply part of the tapestry of village life. You feel a gentle pull toward introspection. The day's details, the precise weight of a basket, the sharp taste of bread, the careful fold of cloth, begin to dissolve into softer memories. These passing moments confirm that true composure is not found in achieving anything or accomplishing any great deed. It is found simply in observing the continuous flow. The deepening sky signals the imminent arrival of the first stars. At first, they are hesitant, like shy jewels being released one by one. You trace their slow appearance across the black velvet canvas, marking them mentally. Each pinprick of light feels ancient, bearing witness to countless twilight shifts just like this one. The shift from visible color to starlight is a profound recalibration for your senses. Your eyes adjust slowly, moving from the soft gradients of blue and gray to the stark points of distant fire. This act of visual adaptation mirrors a deeper internal turning, settling you into a quiet receptivity. A sense of deep peace begins to settle over you, weighted by the coolness of the air and the immensity above. You realize that this period, this perfect balance between the noise of day and the commitment of sleep, is perhaps the most valuable time. It is when the world holds its breath, allowing simple presence to become enough sustenance. Your mind wanders back through the movements of the day, not dwelling on specific conversations or tasks, but on the feel of those moments. The rough texture of the whetstone, the coolness of the water against your wrist, the satisfying scrape of wood grain. These physical memories carry a gentle resilience into the coming dark. You settle further into stillness, allowing the profound silence that accompanies true nightfall to encompass you. You simply let yourself be held by the slow unfolding of the evening, knowing that in this quiet witnessing, you have found a deep and restful measure of attractiveness, the calm assurance of one who knows their place within the enduring rhythm of time. The lantern flickers, casting a moving circle of warm orange onto the packed earth floor. You do not need to look at it often. You know the rhythm of its weak, wavering light. It is enough to settle your gaze upon that dancing pool of yellow gold, watching how the shadows stretch and contract against the rough plaster wall. The flame smells faintly of rendered animal fat and soft wood, a scent unique to this quiet hour when all other activity has slowed down. You are settled deep into the low, simple wooden bench near the corner, allowing your spine to find a comfortable curve that resists any attempt at straightness or rigidity. You notice how the glow does not illuminate everything fully. It seems to touch only the things immediately close enough to absorb its warmth. The far corners of the room remain steeped in a velvety, undisturbed gloom, corners holding secrets and quiet histories you are presently unburdened from remembering. You lift your hand, studying the lines etched into your knuckles, lines that speak volumes without ever needing to utter a sound. Each crease tells of a task completed, of cold mornings and sun-drenched afternoons. Your attention drifts downward to the small wooden table beside you. On it rests a piece of rough spun linen, slightly stained with what might be dried vegetable juice, or perhaps merely dust from the market's lively square. You gently trace a finger over the woven pattern, feeling the faint unevenness of the threads beneath your fingertip. The cloth is resilient, worn soft by countless washes and folds, a physical map of routine life. It feels entirely yours, imbued with the slow history of simple use. You remember the feel of that rough linen earlier in the day, against your skin as you dressed, providing a comforting barrier between yourself and the cool evening air. That practicality, that deep sense of something being just right for the moment, is what settles the mind more effectively than any elaborate preparation ever could. The darkness outside presses against the small, oiled paper window pane. You can hear only the faintest sounds filtering through. Perhaps the distant, soft clatter of wood on stone from a nearby house, or maybe the whisper of wind passing through dried thatch roofing. These sounds do not interrupt. They merely underline the depth of the quiet you inhabit. It is a necessary silence, one that allows your breath to deepen and slow down with an unforced ease. You consider the weight of time when viewed through this low light. Time does not rush here. It simply pools, thick and slow like cooling pitch. You think about the water you drew earlier, remembering the satisfying chill that struck your hands from the cold stone lip of the well. The taste of that fresh, metallic-smelling water. It was a profound anchor to the living moment. It was clean in a way that suggested nothing artificial or wasted. Your gaze drifts across the empty space of the room, taking in the textures, the granularity of the wood grain on the bench, the faint, chalky residue on the stone wall where years of hands have rested, and the subtle sheen of dust motes catching the lantern's occasional flicker. Each detail argues for continuity, that this life, with its small comforts and necessary repetitions, has endured long enough to carve these nuances into existence. It is a slow process of gathering oneself that continues even in this stillness. You realize that composing yourself does not require great acts. It simply requires noticing the persistent presence of the ordinary things. The way the scent of wood smoke persists, mingling with the faint earthiness clinging to your clothes and skin, is one such reminder. It grounds you in the physical reality of where you are. You remember standing by the river's edge earlier, watching the light shift across the wet mudflats. That gradual change of color, from deep slate gray to soft mauves, was more arresting than any sudden display. Life is often found in these slow transitions, these subtle shifts that only patience permits you to register fully. The warmth from the lantern, despite its limited scope, seems to draw your thoughts outward, gently away from tomorrow's obligations, and toward the pure state of being right now. You feel the settled weight of bone on cushion, the steady rhythm of your breathing matching the slow rise and fall of the light within the small pool of yellow-orange glow. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep, but simply to deepen the sensory intake. You focus only on the internal landscape, the gentle slowing of the heart's beat, the slight cooling sensation against your neck where you breathe deeply. When you open your eyes again, the world seems just as it was, yet viewed through a slightly softened filter, a filter created by deep rest and reflection. The composure you seek is not an achievement. It is merely the residue left over after all the effort of pretending to be something else has ceased. It resides in the quiet acceptance of what the light illuminates, and equally quietly, what the surrounding gloom keeps hidden. You settle back against the low wood, absorbing the weight of the enduring routine, a profound peace settling around you like the